Good afternoon. I'm speaking from Albuquerque on a snowy afternoon, and I'm Mark Michael. I'm the president of the Archaeological Conservancy. Welcome to our virtual lecture series. We're very pleased that so many of our members are able to join us. Our speaker today is Jim Walker, who is the vice president and the Southwestern regional director of the Archaeological Conservancy. He holds a bachelor's degree in anthropology and a master's of business administration from the University of New Mexico. Jim has been working for the Conservancy since 1981, 39 years. He has completed dozens of acquisition projects in the Southwest and conducted many more educational projects. Jim.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that introduction. I'm Jim Walker. As Mark said, the Southwest Regional Director for the Conservancy, and I'm here to tell you about what I think is really one of the more interesting archaeological preserves that we have done as an organization. And I'm going to be talking about San José de las Huertas, and I have a PowerPoint presentation to give you, and so I'm going to begin by putting up my PowerPoint and sharing it with you. And hang on here, hit the right button first.
You can just click on share at the bottom of the screen there.
Okay. Got it. There we go. Now I think
There you go. We see you.
we're in business. And let me get this going. Now, how's that? Good. Well, San José de las Huertas is a Spanish colonial village, and it's located northeast of Albuquerque in the Rio Grande Valley. And it was occupied between 1764 and 1823. And these three Pueblo pots were excavated from one of the 22 colonial houses located at Las Huertas during a pipeline salvage excavation in 1980. San José de las Huertas is situated in the foothills of the Sandia Mountains, just east of the Rio Grande, near Placitas, New Mexico. And Placitas is a bedroom community of Albuquerque. And here in this photo, you can see the site in the foreground and the beautiful Sandia Mountains in the background. Following the founding of Santa Fe in 1610, thousands of colonists entered what is now American Southwest from what was now Mexico. What is now Mexico? Following the Camino Real to settle the fertile valleys of New Mexico and Arizona. Most of the New Mexico settlements were along the Rio Grande and its tributaries. On September 20th, 1765, Juan Gutierrez of Bernalillo made a petition before the Spanish governor of New Mexico, Tomás Valdez Cachupin, for a tract of vacant land at the place commonly called Las Huertas. Las Huertas means the gardens in Spanish, at the northern foot of the Sandia Mountains. The petition was made on behalf of a total of 9 families. Juan Gutierrez had just sold his ranch to the Pueblo of Santa Ana, pay off some of his debts. The 8 other families in the petition had been his tenants, and they all needed land to pasture livestock for cultivation. Gutierrez indicated that the land at Las Huertas had adequate water and was suitable for cultivation. And indeed, Las Huertas Creek, which runs today only during spring runoff and after large cloudbursts, was a stream in Spanish colonial times. It's possible that Gutierrez and the 8 other families may have already settled at Las Huertas by the time the petition was submitted. Over a year later, September 28th, 1766, Governor Chacupin ordered the alcalde of Santo Domingo to examine the land to make sure that it didn't encroach on existing grants or Indian lands. The alcalde found no reason not to grant the request. Fortunately, Governor Chacupin died before issuing the grant. The 9 families settled on the land and began Las Huertas without a formal grant. Why move from the Rio Grande into the Foothill Sandias? 2 important climatological factors need to be considered in answering this question. One is orographic rainfall, and the other one is the concept of cold sink. Orographic rainfall. With New Mexico's normal storm track from west to east, when moist air is lifted as it flows over the Sandia Mountains, it forms clouds and releases precipitation on the windward or west face of the mountain. And so the foothills get more annual rainfall than the river valley. The second concept, cold sink. On windless nights in the spring and fall, colder air sinks to the valley floor, leaving a warmer layer of air in the foothills. So there are actually more frost-free growing days in the foothills than there are on the valley floor. Both of those factors are very important to agriculturalists. So here is a plan map of the village of San Jose de las Huertas. The village was occupied, again, from 1764 to 1823. As many as 21 families may have lived at the site. The ruin is now a permanent archaeological research preserve owned and managed by the Archaeological Conservancy. As you can see, the village had an exterior wall to shelter livestock. And I'm going to highlight the exterior wall. There is the exterior wall of the village. The wall also helped to protect the residents from hostile attacks. By 1767, a total of 21 families were living in Las Huertas. They petitioned the new governor in Santa Fe to complete the grant process. On December 31st, 1767, the alcalde of Santo Domingo again visited the village, and under the instruction of the governor, he allotted the settlers individual fields and ordered them to proceed with cultivation. He designated a town site and gave each family a house lot. He designated the grant boundaries and performed the necessary ceremonies to place the grantees in royal possession of their property. Navajo and Apache raiding on Spanish settlements for livestock, food, and slaves increased during the period of colonization. The raids placed isolated villages like Las Huertas at great peril. This highlighted the importance of the exterior wall. Only villages with well-organized defense plans survived during this period. In 1786, the Spanish initiated a new policy of military intervention to combat the increased raids by Navajo and Apache groups throughout their new provinces. After subduing the Indians, the Spanish provided food for the Native American groups. And as an additional means to control raiding. The policy worked well, and for nearly 20 years, there was relative peace with the Native American population. It's possible that during this time, a few houses were constructed outside the protective exterior wall at San Jose de Las Huertas. So I also want to point out before I leave this slide, this pipeline right here, because we're going to learn quite a bit about it. You'll also notice there's a little feature right here that says excavated house. And we're going to be talking about that house very, very soon. You can see also in this slide, there is Las Huertas Creek. You see areas where fields probably were around it. And this is a feature you can see on the ground and also from Google Earth. It's a line of planted trees. You don't know really what that means. So on to the next slide. In 1810, a significant event occurred in Mexico that would change the history of the Southwest. Mexican Revolution resulted in a diversion of money, supplies, and soldiers from the northern frontier. This shift resulted in the renewal of Navajo and Apache raids. By 1821, the revolution had ended, and a Mexican governor now ruled New Mexico. In 1823, the residents of Las Huertas were ordered by the governor in Santa Fe to abandon their village and move to settlements along the Rio Grande for their own protection. So the site of Las Huertas had been misidentified and misrecorded by archaeologists as a Native American pueblo. Now, how could that happen? Well, as it turns out, a lot of the material culture on the ground at Las Huertas was mainly Pueblo pottery, dating from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. So what is all this Pueblo pottery? And why is it on this Spanish colonial site? And the answer lies in the distance to Mexico City on the Camino Real. Because if you're going to go live in New Mexico for an extended period of time, you're a colonist, you're heading out of town, you can't take everything with you. And so Spanish settlers wound up commissioning pottery vessels to be made by local Pueblo potters. And in this slide, I point out some very interesting pieces of pottery. Let's begin with this one. This is a candlestick. This is not a type of pottery that the Pueblo people would have made. It is a piece of Pueblo pottery in Spanish vessel form. Let's look at this. What do you think? It's a salt cellar. Well, definitely a foreign colonial vessel. And again, it's being done in by Pueblo potters. These three pieces are soup bowls. And you do not find soup bowls in Pueblo pottery prior to the arrival of the Spanish. And so that is why there is so much Pueblo pottery on the surface of Las Huertas and why it confounded archaeologists until this happened. And the first excavations at Las Huertas were performed in 19... when MAPCO Corporation, standing for the Mid-American Pipeline Company, built a liquid petroleum pipeline on BLM adjacent to the village. And in the photo, the pipeline is under construction. And so they found a structure right here. And they decided, well, maybe we should excavate it because it's going to be impacted by at least part of the pipeline. And when they excavated that structure, that's when the 3 Pueblo pots in the first slide were discovered. So that would be 1980. So let's take a look at what they found at that location. This is a typical Pueblo house right up here. You can see that it's got a bedroom and a kitchen. It would have been made out of adobe with a stone foundation. We see 2 fireplaces. There's a fireplace in the kitchen. There's a fireplace in the bedroom. There's the entry. There is a plastered bin for whatever purpose in the kitchen. And the 3 pots were found right here. The floor to the kitchen would have been a plastered dirt floor. And as the archaeologists were cleaning off the plastered dirt floor, they noticed this feature. And they said, oh, look, there's a ring in the floor. What could that be? Well, if you look at this diagram, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. There we go. If you look at this diagram, you can see the 3 pots. Here is pot A, and that would be the one on the top. Here is pot B. Pot B is broken and in the fill of the hole. And there is pot C. You'll notice that pot C is pretty much intact. Pot A has had the bottom knocked out of it. And so what this functioned as was a subfloor storage cyst, we believe, for grain. And so what are these pots? They're pretty magnificent for such a humble little house. Well, this pot and this pot are both Ranchitos polychrome pots, probably from Santa Ana Pueblo. And the dates on those pots are roughly 1760 to 1810. Each one is about 24 to 26 centimeters tall. The middle pot's different, though. This is a Capo Black jar, probably from San Felipe Pueblo. It's 24 centimeters tall. So that's where the pots came from. Now, I might also point out that this design, Spanish colonial house, it's like they passed the blueprints out and gave them to all the colonists, because all of the Spanish colonial houses look very, very similar to this one. You might look at it, you might say, well, that's pretty small for a family. But you've got to remember that you have to heat whatever you build. And so the smaller the house, the easier it is to keep warm. And I know at my house 2 nights ago, it was 8 degrees. And I think that that's one of the main reasons why these houses are small. It also takes a relatively small amount of energy, to make a small basic house. This house is about 10 feet by 20 feet. And I think it's really interesting because I was reading an article in Albuquerque's paper about a tiny home village that has just been opened this week to accommodate the homeless. And the houses in the tiny home village are 10 by 20. And so it's certainly possible to live in a space that small. You get real friendly with all the family members, but again, it's easier to build, it's easier to heat. And those are 2 important things, especially if you're eking out a living in the frontier. And I might add that there are now at least 5 pipelines now buried in that corridor that I indicated that's immediately adjacent to San Jose de las Huertas. That's on BLM land, and BLM decided as a policy that they would put any pipelines in the same place so it would minimize the impact on the land that they hold. So in the mid-1980s, Shell and Enron built a 30-inch stainless steel pipeline from Cortes, Colorado to Midland, Texas, crossing New Mexico diagonally. You might say, wow, what could they be transporting from Cortes, Colorado to Midland, Texas that would require such an incredible investment? And the answer is carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is being used in the Permian Basin to squeeze the last, to push the last amount of oil through shale deposits in fields that have been pretty much depleted and can no longer be traditionally pumped. And so they are mining the carbon dioxide out of the ground in Cortes. They're liquefying it, and they're sending it down this pipeline all the way to Midland. The companies bought 12 acres of San Jose de las Huertas, and it was their plan to put a pumping station on the 12 acres. And I've got the cursor right on the 12-acre piece that Shell, Mobil, and Enron bought. Well, their plans changed when community activists in Placitas, I might add people who are known for community activism, protested the building of a pumping station so close to their town. And what happened was that Shell, Mobil, and Enron picked another location along this long pipeline to the pumping station. They only needed one, and it had to be somewhere near the middle. So the 12 acres was declared surplus. And after years of negotiations, Shell, Mobil, and Enron finally agreed to donate the 12-acre tract to the Archaeological Conservancy. And so our journey at San Jose de las Huertas began with this 12-acre tract donated to the organization in 1986. So, you know, when you don't have all the money in the world, and believe me, we don't, sometimes patience and perseverance can lead you to success. And that's exactly what happened at San Jose de las Huertas, because there's our second acquisition, a 1988 8-acre purchase. The third acquisition at San Jose de las Huertas was this piece, a 5-acre donation. And it's interesting because this piece had been owned by the San Jose de las Huertas land grants. And they realized that, hey, we're doing something important out here. We have an 5-acre piece of Las Huertas. Let's donate it to the Conservancy. The next important piece is right here. This is a 1.5-acre building lot. There was a developer that developed a subdivision right over here. And this was part of the land that he bought, this 1.5-acre piece that extended into the site. And I approached him in 2003 and tried to negotiate with him. And he said, I'm not negotiating with you. You know, makes me mad what you're doing over there with Las Huertas, and you're taking good land and setting it aside and making it unavailable for development. I'm not going to help you at all. And so he would not deal with the Conservancy. And we actually I had to get a friend of mine to go buy that 5-acre purchase as a straw buyer to the Conservancy. And you should have seen the look on the developer's face when he realized what had happened. And so we bought the 1.5 acre lot in 2003. Finally, the last acquisition we made at San Jose de Las is this 15-acre piece. It surrounds this house, which was owned by Susan Blumenthal, a very sweet neighbor, a member of the Conservancy, and someone who's very interested in preservation. She gave this 15 acres around her house to finish off the development itself. And included in this 15 acres is a very interesting feature. This is a P2 pueblo that predates the occupation of the Spanish colonial village. And it was just along Las Huertas Creek. It was on her property, and it came with the 15 acres that she donated. So that's how we got up to a preserve that's roughly 40 acres. So here's what San Jose de Las Huertas looks like today. The stones that you see in the picture in the foreground are part of the defensive outer. Most of the Spanish colonial archaeological sites in the Southwest have been destroyed by development, unfortunately. Underneath modern buildings in Santa Fe, constructed before Santa Fe County adopted the archaeological ordinance, under lakes created by dams on the Rio Grande, like Cochiti Lake. San Jose de Las Huertas is really unique because it was abandoned in 1823. It was never reoccupied. And so the preserve has a single component. Actually, it's two components if you consider Cottonwood Pueblo, but a single component historic archaeological occupation, and that is Spanish colonial. When the nearby foothill village of Presidios was established by colonists in the 1830s, those residents chose to live in a valley that was a few miles south of Las Huertas. So when they came back to the foothills in the 1830s, they picked a slightly different place. Really helped. From 2002 to 2004, Heather Atherton and Nan Rothschild of Barnard College, Columbia University, conducted an archaeological testing project at Las Huertas. And if you'll recall, all of the Conservancy preserves that are in our system are available for research under controlled conditions. They combine archaeological testing with oral history research and documentary research to help create a clearer picture of the hardships and complexity of colonial life at the site. And you'll notice in this picture how close the features and these foundation stones are from the surface of. So let's look at some aspects of their excavation, including some of the material culture. So in this photo, you see a piece of historic Pueblo pottery, and this is a polychrome piece. You also see an obsidian projectile point that was discovered at the excavation. It's less than an inch long, so it's a pretty small point. Here you have a piece of drilled bone. Don't really know what the function of this artifact would be. Could be a piece of jewelry. Here are a collection of Majolica sherds. Now, Majolica is a very interesting glazed ware pottery produced in central Mexico. It was brought to New Mexico over the Camino Real prized luxury item among the colonists. And so anytime you find Mahalica on an archaeological site in New Mexico, you can almost always say that it is associated with the Spanish colonial period. This is Pueblo pottery, black on red. Another piece of polychrome pottery found during the excavation. More polychrome pottery. You'll notice that this piece has an intact rim. So this probably been a job. This is another piece of polychrome pottery. Not really sure what these marks are, whether they're accidental or intentional, but very interesting, very interesting. Now to look at some of the photos from the excavation, here you see adobe bricks on top and stone river cobbles as a foundation underneath. Very typical of the wall construction at Las Huertas. In this photo, you can see a foundation wall right here. This appears to be, I'm gonna guess, a floor made of adobe bricks, because you see the lines of the adobe in the floor. Here are archaeologists and some of the features that they found. There's a corner hearth right here. You can see that this portion of it is demonstrating thermal. And so you've got a foundation wall here, a foundation wall here. If you'll think back to that sketch of the Spanish colonial house, this is probably either a hearth in the kitchen or a hearth in the bedroom. And typically they were built as corner hearths. You see another stone foundation, and again you can see the cobbles below, and you can see the adobe bricks forming the wall right here. This is really interesting. This feature that was found by the archaeologists, this is a thermal feature. And they realized that it may have been a smelter, or something that you can find in Spanish colonial sites. Typically don't find them in pueblos unless those pueblos have had a Spanish colonial occupation or contact. And so what would they have been smelting? More than likely lead, also possibly silver. And this was one of the things that the colonists were mining, smelting, and shipping back to Mexico City. Here again are archaeologists at work. This is an interesting detail here that's being pointed out, and that is that they found this in a test trench, and they believe that this may be evidence of a wagon rut. Now, they might be able to tell that, I'm not really sure, but that's at least what they reported. We do know that there is at least one what we believe to be a wagon trail that leads away from San Jose de las Huertas. I might point out that they were in contact and they needed to be in communication with the other Spanish colonial villages that were in the Rio Grande Valley. There was no church. It's been found at Las Huertas, no chapel, nothing. We believe that these people took a 3 or 4 hour horseback ride or wagon ride, either Bernalillo or Algodones, if they wanted church service or if they needed to, let's say, bury someone. But nothing that even resembles a chapel has ever been found here. And also, there's no mention in any of the oral history about a church being here. It's a test trench that's got a wall going on it, and so the wall would be here. This is a test trench that has been built across one of the exterior walls to try and better define it. And many of the colonial houses were built up against the exterior walls. And if you think about it, that would be really an idea, because you'd only have to build 3 walls rather than 4. You could use the exterior wall as one of the walls in your house. So here is this is a house wall. There is a house wall. You can see the foundation stones. This is a plastered floor, lighter colored material on here, that's plaster. And it looks as if there are either rodent holes or perhaps features that were in this floor at one time. A shot of archaeologists at work, and I want to point out something to you up here. This scar represents the blind corridor. And so that is just on the other side of our property. And that's where all the pipelines are buried. These archaeologists are measuring in some of the features that they found on the floor. So in this picture, you can see again the Sandia Mountain in the background. The site is in the foreground. And this represents some of the houses that are in Placitas, and that is Susan Blumenthal's house right there. So the right down here, where the cottonwood trees are. So that is a snapshot of San Jose de las Huertas, and a very, very unique site. Spanish colonial sites are one of the Conservancy's top national priority, and the Conservancy let's see. Okay, can you still see me?
We can see
What did
you.
I do? Okay.
You just need to
good.
reshare
And you can
it.
hear me too.
Yes,
Good,
we
good.
can hear you.
Okay, that's good. So what I was going to say was that the Conservancy actually has, in its collection of 550 archaeological preserves, there are 11 preserves in Arizona and New Mexico that have either a Spanish colonial or a Spanish conquest period component. And we'd like to get more because these are really considered the rarest of the rare in terms of archaeological sites in the Southwest. And being able to excavate them and understand them is certainly going to be very important in the future. So thank you very much. And I guess I can try and answer some of the questions that pop up on my screen. Is that all right, April? Or would you like me to do that next?
That sounds great. If you have some in your chat, I also have some that I'm going to send to you via chat.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have some
Okay.
in my chat. And so let's see if I can't find some. Okay, one question, is this being recorded?
Yes, it is being recorded. It will be placed on YouTube by the end of the week on our panel. And it's also currently live streaming on Facebook. So if you go to our Facebook page, it'll be available there as well.
Let me see. Was there a public archaeology requirement for the pipeline company to carry out rescue archaeology? Who carried out the excavations? And I can answer that question for you. Yes, there was a public requirement. And since they needed a federal permit to place the pipeline across New Mexico, that meant that they had to send archaeologists out to survey the pipeline. If the archaeologists found anything along the path of the pipeline, it was necessary for the archaeologists to begin by doing testing. And then if testing yielded significant intact deposits, it was necessary to excavate anything that might have been in the path. And so the Shell Mobile and Enron hired, let's see, not Shell Mobile and Enron. Let's go back to with the three pots. The excavations that were done in 1980 were done by Alan Ferg, and he was working for CASA, a company called Complete Archaeological Services Association or something like that. And he was the one who did the excavations of the two-room house that yielded the three pots. And so, yes, there was a requirement. The company complied with that requirement. And let me see if I can't find some other things here. How many people lived at the site? And, you know, I would say that probably as many as about 75 people lived at the site. Just kind of a stab in the dark, but I'm sure there were couples. I'm sure there were kids. So somewhere between 75, maybe a top of 100. But with 21 houses, I'd say that would be a pretty good guess. Now, the Spanish were very good at taking census data. If there was something that needed to be counted or something that needed to be inventoried or kept track of, the Spanish were excellent at it. And quite often those records are available. Don't remember reading census data for Las Huertas, but I'm sure that that data could be found and expanded upon. And so it says, oh, is there an estimate of the number of houses and population? Again, 21, perhaps a few more houses, and a population estimate of around 75. Where did the silver ore come from? There is none in this area. Well, that's interesting. There is silver in this area. And in the Cerrillos Hills, silver is available. And the Cerrillos Hills is a highly mineralized area. That's probably where the lead would have come from, too. And so silver and lead and turquoise are all found in the Cerrillos Hills. Why would someone want to live here? It's a beautiful view, but it doesn't appear to be a viable farmland. Well, that's true. Not excellent farmland. I think that the fields where, let's say, you were closer to the river would have more rich alluvial fill in them, and they would be more receptive to growing things. And this New Mexico doesn't have all that many great looking fields unless they're in river valleys. So you have to do what you can with the soil that you've got. And these people were able to eke a living. And let me see. What is the elevation of the site? Good question. I believe the elevation of the site is probably 6,800 feet. I'm guessing, but I think that's about right. Can you describe the type of public outreach that was conducted with the public? Well, all of our preserves are available for visitation. And this particular site has had lots and lots of groups, school groups, archaeological groups, historical groups, and other people who have visited the site. Now, right now, all of our tours of sites in the US have been put on hold due to COVID. So don't call me and say, I want a tour tomorrow, because I can't accommodate you. We're very interested in keeping our site stewards healthy, because we want them around when all these people finally get out of the house and go out and see archaeological sites. But we do our best in terms of public outreach to give lectures like this. I've given this lecture to a number of different groups, and to reach out to school groups, to archaeological groups, to museums and other entities to try and get people on the ground on our sites, because we really want to see our sites used. And was there a torreon? Good question. Good question. No, we have not found a torreon at this particular site. We do have torreons at least 2 other conservancy preserves that I'm aware of, not this one, and I don't know why. Was there evidence of animal husbandry? Yes. These people were raising horses and cattle. And so that would have been very important. This is one of the reasons why the Native Americans were raiding the site, because they were raiding the site for horses. When you say Spanish colonial, were these people Spanish colonists or mostly natives in a sort of cultural group? No, they were Spanish colonists. Now, they wouldn't have been the only people living in a Spanish colonial village, because there probably would have been Native Americans who were working for them, who lived at the village. And the relationship, to really understand the relationship between Spanish colonists and Native Americans who worked for them, is difficult. Because you might have some researchers who would look at the situation and say, well, they were slaves. And it's possible that could have happened. I mean, the Spanish were involved in slave trade. And it's a dark side of the colonization of New Mexico. It appears as if, rather than taking Pueblo people, who they were really trying to get along with, back to Mexico as domestic servants, we know some of this happened, but they were involved in bartering for slaves that were captured by the Pueblo people, who were probably Plains people, either Apache or Navajo people. And we know that some of this went on at Pecos Pueblo, because they kind of had a little flea markets set up outside of Pecos Pueblo where this very thing happened, and it was documented by people who saw it happening. So this is something that we need really more information before we can say something definitive about it. But not everyone living at the site would have been a Spanish colonist. But the people in charge of the site, the people making decisions about where to plant, what to plant, those would have been Spanish colonists and people who were loyal to the crown. Where were the hybrid Spanish form Pueblo manufacturers found? The soup bowls, for example, was that a different event than the pipeline discovery? Yes. As far as I know, we haven't come up with, except for the 3 pots, we haven't come up with vessels that are large enough out of San Jose de Las Huertas to be really able to figure out what sort of vessel that pottery shard came from. However, there are Spanish vessel formed pottery pieces that have come from other Pueblo sites that were occupied into the Spanish colonial period, including Sapahue, and there are some from the Zuni area. And so these were fairly widespread. It's not like there are 10 of them or something like that. It's fairly well known, but none have been found at San Jose de Las Huertas. And I guess I brought that Pueblo Spanish colonial vessel form thing in to really illustrate the fact that these people didn't bring pots and pans and dishes and things like that with them because they really couldn't. They only brought with them ammunition and things that they couldn't live without. And so fortunately, I'm sure the Pueblo pottery was very functional and great to use, and it probably didn't cost them anything. When I say they commissioned pieces of Pueblo pottery to be made by the Pueblos, I think they demanded that the Pueblos make Pueblo pottery for them. That's my guess. Let's see. Okay, did the research include talking with descendants known from this village? Yes, it did. And as a matter of fact, there was a piece of research, and I was searching for the book and I couldn't find it. I was going to have a slide on it, but during the Depression, a number of writers were hired by the U.S. government to go out and actually do interviews with older people. And there were some interviews that were done of people whose ancestors lived at San Jose de Las Huertas. And those oral histories were part of the research that has been done at San Jose de Las Huertas. Were the colonists hunting to supplement diet? Yes, of course they were. And so what would they have been hunting? Well, I'm sure rabbits were high on that list. They also could have been hunting deer. I live in the foothills and we have deer that come through the yard on a regular basis. They would have been fishing in the river. They would have been using all of the resources that would have been utilized by the Pueblo people and using them to supplement their diet. Could this have been a military outpost also? Not really. We think of Spanish military outposts as presidios. And There was a Presidio in Santa Fe. And then when a bank decided to put in an underground parking lot on a piece of land just north of the Palace of the Governors, just off the main plaza in Santa Fe, they wiped out what would have been left of the Presidio at Santa Fe. So we don't know an awful lot about this, but Presidios would have been places where the Spanish kept garrisons of troops, and there was one in Santa Fe. But I don't believe that troops would have been stationed at Las Huertas. So they would have been stationed somewhere else, probably at the Presidio in Santa Fe. But they did patrol the area, so we know they were in the area.
Hey, Jim, we probably have enough time for just a few more questions, just to give you a heads up.
Okay. Here is someone I know, Mark Barnes. And he says, when I worked with the HCRS derived from NPS in the Carter years, I saw Las Huertas, always interested in the site as I worked at the Tucson Presidio. And the material that was used in my dissertation recognized the various types of Majolica as being the same found at Tucson. Yes, the Majolica was produced in one place in Mexico and distributed in Arizona and in New Mexico. And so the designs would be very similar. In addition to Majolica, probably from Pueblo, Mexico, did they find any other imported lead glazed earthenware? Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. And finally, here's another, or we can make this the last one, and I can answer the rest of the questions privately or whatever you feel like doing. One of the Conservancy's earlier Spanish colonial sites was Mission Guavavi in southern Arizona, which has been transferred to NPS as an outlier to Tumacacri. Yes, Mission Guavavi was Father Kino's first mission in what is now the United States, and Mission Guavavi was built, it's near Nogales, and it wound up on a private ranch. The rancher donated Mission Guavavi to us, and this is one of the sites that we have transferred to the federal government. It is now part of Tumacacri Mission's National Historical Park and is in the custodianship of the National Park Service. So if you want to cut it off there, I don't know. It's up to you.
That sounds good. We can actually, I'll be saving any questions that we didn't cover, and I'll be posting them on the webpage, so you all can follow up there.
And I think that's what we can do with the questions we didn't get to. We'll see if we can't get you questions and answers, and just see how you can handle it. So you can go to the website and finish up on this. Again, I want to thank you all for attending. I want to thank all of you also for supporting the work done by our organization. I can assure you that we absolutely could not have done what we've accomplished over the last 40 years without the kind of true grassroots support that we've gotten from our members. And you guys are great. And you've kept us going this long, and we certainly intend to not let you down. We're going to work on other projects in other areas, and what we have now in terms of archaeology that's out there is all we'll ever have. They're not making any more Spanish colonial villages. They're not making any more pueblos, not making any more rock shelters. And so, whether it's Caddo Mound complexes in Texas, whether it is rock art galleries, in New Mexico, whether it's This site, this is what we have to work with, and so we should do everything in our power to preserve and protect what's left while we still can. And so thank you for everything you've done for the Conservancy. I want you to know we really appreciate it. Thank you.